Welcome everyone to this week's CanJS Community Hangout. Thank you for joining us. This week we're going to do things a little bit different. We're starting a new tradition where on the last Friday of every month we give only one presentation, and then we're going to spend the rest of the time going over the roadmap for CanJS and answering your guys' questions. So I've turned on the Q&A app. You can use it to ask questions, to vote up questions that others have asked. So we're going to answer the questions in order of which one's got the most votes. So please feel free to open up the Q&A app and at any time start asking questions, and make sure to vote up the ones you want answered. So our presentation for today comes from fellow Batovian Curtis Cummings, and he'll be walking us through his recent experience working with can.Component and Google Maps. So without further ado, Curtis, it's all yours.
Thanks, Chris. So recently in a project I was working with the Google Maps API and came across a bunch of issues that seem to be pretty common if Stack Overflow is any indicator. So I wanted to go through a demo app I built that kind of dealt with some of those things. So let me share my screen here. So what I've got here is a map, a little demo app with a map that runs inside a can.Component. So in this particular case, I'm showing all food trucks in Toronto that are open 4 p.m. to the end of today. So there's only 5 of them right now. So when I click on one of these, a little info window pops up. I can click on the details and get a description of what it is, where it is.
Yeah, Curtis, if you go a little to the left, to the right, you'll see an Ajax, which I always find amusing. There is a village called Ajax.
Oh, yeah, I know Ajax.
There.
Yes.
We have a Vulcan here, too.
Right. So this just shows a little bit of information if you click on a different one. And then you can also search. So I feel like bacon after work, so I'm going to change this to 6:30 and search for bacon, and I get 2 places that will serve me bacon. Bacon Nation sounds good, and so I get the details here. It's open 6 to 11, and it's here. So how this is built, I've split the entire app into 2 components. I have to blow this up for you guys. Truck search is a component that kind of wraps the entire thing. And within that, I've got a truck map component, which is what powers the map. So truck search kind of sets up everything, handles the searching, and handles showing details. And truck map is really what this presentation is about. So I'll gloss through truck search when I show it. So here's the code. So we'll look at truck search first. And you'll notice I'm actually using the new steel. So this is all ES6 module syntax. The new steel is amazing. You should use it. So here we have truck search. All we're doing is we're finding all the trucks that we round up our time to the nearest half hour, and that's how we know when we want or when the truck should be open. The first important bit, though, is we've got to load the Google Maps API. So I'm using this function called load maps, and when that's returns, or I'm passing a callback, and I set this map ready attribute to true when that happens. So let's look at what load maps is. It's actually this thing right here. So there's lots of ways to do this. This is a way of using callbacks. Basically, if you pass the Google URL a callback parameter, it will invoke that function when the API is ready. So here I set up a maps loaded function. The callback I passed invoke when maps loaded gets called, and then I'll delete it off the window because I don't want, as much as possible, I don't want things on the global. And so at that point, so I set map ready to true, and if you look at the template, map ready is here. If map is ready, I render my truck map component. So the API is ready, it's loaded, so now I can actually draw a map. So let's look at truck map. So when the component gets inserted, I create a new Google map, and I use the internal template here has a div called map. And I pass it a bunch of options specifying the center and the zoom and all that. I create an info window so I can keep changing the content of that. And then I go through all the trucks I have and I add all their markers to the map. So add markers is the next interesting piece. This is how you can kind of tie together your model layer and your markers. So here, add marker, all it does is it creates a new Google marker, sets the position. So the attribute, I have latitude and longitude in my model that's getting returned. So I use that as my position, and the map is the existing map property on scope. I keep that around because in a lot of these API calls, you have to tell it what map you're working with.
What is Curtis? What is the what's the map property again? I think I missed that.
The scope map property is the instance of the Google map.
Oh, okay.
So when we inserted, I did a new Google Maps.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you just have to keep that around. You could keep it globally, or you could throw it in the scope. You have to use it for a lot of these API calls. So after I create a marker, I add a couple expandos to it. The current truck instance I add to it, and then I render an info node kind of proactively, because when I click on markers, I want to pop open the info node and populate it with some HTML. So this kind of renders it beforehand, and then it's just a really simple set content call. I don't have to render as I'm clicking. And then the other thing I do every time we add a marker, I'm binding to the marker click event and calling marker click, which just opens the info window, which is right here. So when you search, you get a bunch of new data and you have some existing markers. The way I handle that here, one way you can do it, is I'm actually going to compare all the markers I have and check if they're all the trucks I got and see if they have a marker. If they do, I'm going to remove them from my truck list that I'm iterating through. And so the end result is I'm actually only going to call add marker on new trucks. And here I'm also calling, I'm removing markers that aren't in my response. So basically I'm taking the new result set, and instead of just naively rendering all the markers, I'm removing the ones that aren't there anymore and keeping the ones that are there. And then we resize the map, which basically it takes all the points that we have and makes sure that the zoom and the position of the map encompasses all those points. So that you do that by passing it the function or the latitude of and longitude of every point that you're putting on the map. And kind of call this fit bounds method that does that for you. So let me go back here. So if I do something like anytime, I get all these markers. Then if I search for bacon again at 6:30, it's hard to notice, but I did not remove these markers from the map. I removed everyone else, and I kept these ones. So I think that's about it for using the Google Maps. I don't know if you noticed, but I have a little bit of a bug, and these things seem to pop up very commonly when you're using Google Maps. But every time I click on a marker, details, link, it recenters my map on me. When I put this up on GitHub, I'll have that fixed. But there's lots of little issues that you run into when, especially if you're using this in a tabs widget or something like that. You always have to trigger resize on the map so it will show up. And there's lots of little things that come up like that. But the way I've done it here avoid some of those common pitfalls. Any questions or anything you wanted to see in particular?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I missed this, but what API were you using for this?
It's just the plain old, just the Google Maps API.
Yeah, but I mean to get the food trucks. And...
Oh, sorry. Just a simple model. I have a truck model I call find all with the search text and the time.
And where does the information come from?
I just have it
fixtures?
locally. Yeah, I've just got a local fixture right now.
And what's that API normally? Where does that API come from?
Oh, this is actually another website that has a bunch of information on Toronto food trucks. So this is actually real information. I was just able to get their JSON feed and get a sample data set so I could use it here.
So you could technically hook it up to their API.
You could, yeah.
Okay.
Except they actually embed their JSON into their HTML, which is a little more difficult to scrape.
Those are very Canada results. Bacon Nation.
Yeah, we've got lots of Putin. Let's see this.
I've got a question that's not really so much related to can.Component or the maps, but you mentioned at the very beginning that you're using the new Steel.js and you thought it was awesome. And I don't know if a lot of the viewers are aware, but we just released a brand new version of Steel.js, which is our dependency manager. And I was just kind of wondering what it was that you thought, now that you've actually experienced it, that made it, a lot better than the previous version.
There are so many things. Being able to use CommonJS and ES6, particularly ES6 module, is great because you're kind of future-proofing your code. We can use it today with Tracer and System.js, and then when this stuff eventually lands, you don't need that shim anymore. You only need it for certain browsers, so that's cool. The whole build system is now on Node, so the old one was Java. It was pretty slow once you got to a bigger sized app. This is really, really fast, and it just is much easier to work with than the old Steel. Primarily because we're relying on some other really solid frameworks like the ES6 module loader shim and System.js and a couple other tools. So Steel is more something that composes all those things together and is less concerned about the client-side dependency management. It's more concerned with the build and doing progressive loading and things like that. So you should definitely check it out. We have a brand new website with really good docs.
Awesome.
So, to add one thing to that. The docs are better. But like it's actually got tested now. Is that better?
No, Chris, you need to mute yourself, I think.
Hey, Chris. Okay, is that working?
Much better.
So yeah, the other big thing why it's better is if you guys have ever found. So previously we would use end.js to load the application because we would actually run like the code of your application. So if you had anything that was making AJAX requests or doing a set timeout or just kind of weird behavior, or you were trying to access something that was not like that was something that MJS didn't support, you would have to comment it out or do funny things, and now it just works, which is really great. Like that's a big other reason why it'll just be a lot friendlier to use. The build's much smarter now. Oh, the other thing. So one question I did have, Curtis, is so with Steel, why were you? I saw you were like having to load Google Maps. What were you doing there? Like, you couldn't just use Steel to load that dependency?
I did not try because this is a much more reliable way. I know Require.js has an async plugin that does this, but I didn't see if System.js had something similar.
So this is like a JSON-P thing, right? It's calling map loaded after it finishes loading.
Yeah, and this is along the lines of what they recommend in their Getting Started guide, because as soon as the thing's loaded, it's not actually there available for you yet. So it's actually loads asynchronously for you.
I'd be interested at some point just for Steel to make that work well.
Yeah, I mean, we could make an async plugin like what the other loaders have, where you can do this sort of JSON-P style loading.
Cool.
For this little demo, though, I didn't string any of that stuff together. You can make this as complicated as you want. You could return deferreds instead. I've seen that done. So you can actually, instead of executing a callback, you return a deferred and resolve it when the callback gets loaded or gets invoked. So lots of different approaches. This is just one way of doing it.
Cool. Well, thank you, Curtis, and I hope the echo that I had earlier is gone. Also, just a reminder to everybody before we move on to Justin telling us about the roadmap for CanJS is we are answering questions later. So if you do have any, go ahead and get them posted now. Otherwise, I guess we won't have a lot of questions to answer. So on to you, Justin.
So does anybody know what that showcase button does? Does that do anything? Does that allow us to like label different sections? I don't know.
Showcase.
Yeah, in the Google Hangouts, there's like there's a yellow showcase button.
Press it.
Oh, you can add an item from a website. Okay. Anyways, just talk about the roadmap as it stands right now. So we're going to probably get a 2.1.3 out, or is it 2.1.2? I think it's 2.1.3 out pretty soon. That'll have a lot of important stash fixes. Most of those came because we improved Stash's performance for 2.1.2 quite a bit, but that there were some bugs that were created, but those should be fixed coming pretty soon. I got through almost all the issues that I was planning on getting through. There's just a bunch of documentation ones left. So once that's done, we'll keep working on that and making releases for bug fixes and other things while we start moving to 2.2, which I'm going to create a minor branch for. Hopefully, probably not today, but probably early next week. Create a minor branch that'll have 2.2's code in it. 2.2, we're going to release. We wanted a lot of the 2.3 features in for 2.2, but because I want a 2.2 that works really well with the new Steel.js, I want to release that right away. So 2.2 will be released. When I say works with Steel.js, it's possible to make the new Steel.js work with the current existing code. The problem is that you would have to create your own plugins for if you wanted to include Stash and include Mustache the way that you normally do with Steel right now, and you'd have to include this special build, special version of can.util that works, that Curtis made, that works without that works without a DOM. So those things will be packaged into maybe I'll release a version of those things for people who want to use 2.1 with the latest Steel. But I want to get it all working, so that's why it's going to be part of 2.2. And then something that Josh Marchand has already done, component element methods. What that basically means is you're going to be able to use define. I'll just do a little demo right here. If you have a can.Component, let me make my font bigger.
Justin, you might be showing the wrong window.
Oh, you can't see my...
I see a PowerPoint.
Oh. Hold on. I shared my whole desktop. All right, can you see Aptana?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so if I had a component, let's just call it, date picker. What I might want to have a method that if I get the element from the page, if I were to do var element and I got a date picker element, jQuery, and I got that element, just like the web component spec is going to allow you to do, where you can do element and you could have methods on it, such as like pick or set date, or whoever knows, maybe date, and you could provide a well, ours are going to start with methods, where you could provide a date like like that. So we're going to allow methods type object of can.Component, and these will be able to talk to the scope. I forgot exactly where the scope is going to be. It's either going to be, you do something like, this is going to be the element itself, so you can call other methods. So if there was, activate or something, you call this .activate. But if you wanted to actually talk to the scope and its data, I think
it's on there, element as well.
Is it this .scope?
I think so. I'll ask him.
It might be this .scope, and then you could do something like if scope had a property like date itself, you could whatever the person passed you. Properties might work if you're using like getter setters on the prototype. I think we'll target that. We'll try to make that at least work. A lot of the work that we're having to do to accomplish this, or Josh has done, it's my understanding, is how to make can.Construct work quite a bit differently to make this work. But this will be nice because then you can kind of treat your elements like a date picker element, even closer to treating it like a custom element, which is the whole idea behind web components. So that's one thing we want. The next, Matt can actually probably fill in more about, I'll just explain what it is. He can explain our progress on that, which is allowing content elements to specify a select attribute. So this is kind of part of the shadow DOM. So what this allows is if I had a page and I had, let's say I wanted to use a custom element, I'll say this is just something like my layout, some custom layout thing. If I wanted to have an H1 that was sticky to the top or something like that, or I could say title, this would be always become sticky, any H1s I put in here, and any other content will just be kind of left in the page as it was. By sticky, I mean as you scroll down, this would kind of get attached to the top of the window. Now, my layout, that component, would have a template, and its template have a div that it has the sticky part that it'll do with some styles and maybe some other JavaScript, and it wants to put all H1s inside there. So it'll ask for the source content, but it'll select only the H1s. And it'll put that inside of a sticky div, and everything else it's just going to put like in the page, so select by content. So this is what the content select does. It allows you to take from your source content So this kind of the stuff that the user provides inside my layout, and reposition parts of that within the bigger template. And this is actually like a relative. This is like a super difficult thing to accomplish in all browsers, which is what we're originally targeting. So it would even work in like IE8. So Matt, how's that going?
It's going pretty well. I kind of took took the last couple weeks off at least of working on it. We did kind of a benchmark for it. Well, first I should say the way we're implementing this is currently is we're getting the template and we're recloning it, and every time something changes within the inner content, we're re-rendering the template. So this involved a lot of cloning. So our concern was that cloning would be kind of a expensive operation, but it turns out that's not actually the bottleneck. The bottleneck is we're using a mutation observer polyfill to accomplish this in older browsers, and the implementation that I wrote is very slow. So kind of rewriting that using a new tree structure in order to make that be faster. If you have native mutation observers, it's already very fast. So it's just getting it to work in older browsers that's difficult.
Yeah. So part of the trouble with it is even that method, we're not sure if it's going to work. And just to give a little more clarity on what that method means is, or how it differs from something how Polymer works, is Polymer essentially rewrites the DOM itself. So all of the methods on the DOM, append child, child nodes, kind of all those properties, it rewrites. So anytime you do an append, it's kind of like it's doing append, but all the child, you might not see that element as one of your child nodes. Well, you will anytime you're appending, but it will run the same kind of, anytime a mutation happens, it will rerun and rearrange the whole DOM. Now that's a great method. That's the best method because that's how the browser's actually, or very similar how the browser's going to do it. The problem is we can't, in IE8, old versions of IE8, we can't do that. You can't actually accomplish that behavior. And you can't, I don't think you can do it in IE9, and I remember when I was using Polymer in IE10, there was a lot of bugs in that as well. So I don't even know if it's like viable in IE10. So it kind of pushes it too far back for us as like for CanJS, because we do want to target, kind of browsers that most people still have to support. So our plan is to kind of keep a copy of all templates, and then when they change, kind of reapply this kind of reapply this transformation to the actual DOM that people see. The problem and complexity with that, though, is that we're going to have to make sure all event handlers are kind of copied and any data is copied, and we're not totally sure that that's even itself a viable method. Our last resort is to hack jQuery in the same way that Polymer hacks the DOM. We would hack jQuery to do the same kind of transformation. So if you do jQuery children, you're not going to get children. But then we're going to have to do that potentially in Dojo and everywhere else, so it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a problem. But hopefully we can get in 2.2. We will see.
It seems like such a simple change, but it's actually, there's a lot to make that happen.
Yeah, a ton. So let me next. This one. So, and then Chris has been working on a new version of the homepage, which hopefully we should release as part of 2.2. Just like a minor touches up to the homepage. So for 2.3, once all this stuff is done, we want to finish up and finally get working Supermodel. For those who don't know what Supermodel is, it's really now, I should call it can.Connect. Is kind of the idea. CanModel is great, but you kind of, it's using inheritance where it doesn't belong, right? What can model really is, it's a mixing of RESTful behavior with a can map. So instead of kind of having, your static find all here, and then, but your rules for that model, let's say this was a task, and let's say you want to like complete method, do things right now, so you could find tasks. But this is like this isn't great because, well, what if you have your task model, but then suddenly your services change or how you connect to it changes, and you want to weave in some behavior like real-time behavior or like storing it in local storage temporarily, those kind of things. There's not a great way of doing that other than creating a different model and like overwriting make find all, make find one, those methods, and then inheriting from that model into tasks. That's not a good, inheritance is a very bad pattern for this kind of thing. But what is a good pattern? Hear that. What is a good pattern is kind of mix-ins and weaving in behavior. So what I'd really want to do is like someone can define a can map or maybe even other things eventually. Once there's classes in the browser or just normal prototypes, you could define your behavior. This is a task. This is kind of a task model, right? By model, I mean like, this models a task's behavior. But what I want to do is can connect that RESTful service that would look like this. And then maybe I wanted to also weave in some other behavior. I could do that like local storage.
Justin, would that be all the regular model static?
Yes.
Stuff? Make, find all, and all that parse model. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if it'd be can rest. We don't know what the API is going to look like exactly, but essentially there's going to be a lot of kind of integration points with how you retrieve data, how you convert it, that kind of thing, how you make a request, and you can build plugins that weave themselves into that, and then weave themselves into like your actual model. So we'll still have a can model, which will essentially weave in probably the RESTful behavior and the storage behavior. But we want to start breaking these things out so you can kind of add fun behavior. If you had a feathers.js, for instance, plugin, you could weave that behavior in without having to have like a feathers can model.
So what about like the model store now? Would that be part of? Or that?
Yeah, you would weave that in as well.
Oh, that'd be something you weave in. Okay.
Yeah, you'd weave in pretty much everything. But can model would still exist for the basics because we'll keep that around for backwards compatibility for a while. So that's for 3. That's for 2.3. Oh, dirty checking. Everybody should kind of know what this is. This is basically like Angular style checking an object to see if it's changed. And then for 2.3, also kind of on deck, we want to kind of redo pretty much our whole website to have better GitHub integration. So GitHub is doing a good job of tracking anything that the community releases for open source or like articles and apps and anything else and things that we write. I think it'd be really great to be able to go to a guide on can.Component or a guide or a can.Component's API docs and see the articles that are relevant and upvoted the most on those topics to help people kind of fill in holes in our documentation or guides and things like that. So that's kind of what's on the roadmap.
Can we put like 5 minutes talk about version 3? For the
Sure.
big things. Just, I don't know, personally, I see it as, like, because it's breaking API change a little bit as a kind of a cleanup effort too. So we're going to migrate everything to ES6, I think is the plan, right? It's going to be natively built in ES6 modules, which is really cool. And then we're going to probably drop a bunch of our old deprecated stuff that we're still having 2-point versions like EJS.
Plugins.
Yeah, it's kind of.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think 3.0 will be much less like features and much more just cleanup.
Yeah, like things like EJS, like some of the plugins. I was thinking the constructor, like not being able to make name constructors anymore, right? Because we expect in version
structures
to name your constructs anymore, like to give them a name on the public namespace.
Yeah, maybe. Some people love that so much, though.
It's weird.
But if you use a module loader, then ideally you wouldn't need it. But anyway, a couple of things like that, and
if you're using a module loader, you totally don't need it. But
yeah,
just not everybody does that.
And then revisit what browsers I guess we're going to support, because technically it still would be it's still IE7 for us right now, right?
No, it's 8. We're 7.
8? 7 jQuery 1.9 is 7, yeah. And I forgot what the last thing was, but yeah, basically a cleanup effort and making it a little more streamlined, of like getting rid of all the old stuff that we deprecated in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think I'm hoping that with kind of the new steel, that we can make it very easy to write plugins for CanJS that'll work like for anybody who's got to use, and almost in any circumstance that people need to use, because you can, you could write your modules in ES6, and then they'll work for people in ES6, and you can export them to AMD, CommonJS, or yes, CommonJS, but probably less likely. Old steel syntax and to like standalone. That'll allow us to kind of move out plugins that we're just kind of like iffy on, like can map list, things like that, or sort, or whatever it's called, the one that's it just kind of hangs on but needs to die.
Well, and there's still the questions: what libraries are we going to support in the future, right? Like, it would be nice to have a standalone CanJS and just say jQuery and standalone, because then everybody who is using other libraries can still use CanJS. But we don't. There was a lot of effort involved in getting some things to work in some of the not like jQuery libraries. Right?
That's gonna be big for content select. Like if we try to even do that, it's gonna be a pain. Personally, I think it should be jQuery and Zeptos, and that's all.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who do use the other ones, but it is far less.
Having a standalone version wouldn't lock them out, pretty much, right? So
the standalone version,
that's something to pursue.
Yeah.
Well, we just modify the DOM ourselves directly?
Yeah, kind of like your own implementation of like a whatever of can.Util, right? Whatever you need for can.Util.
Yeah, I mean, we're like 50% there already.
Yeah.
With everything in can.Util, there's very few things that we would actually have to implement to get a standalone version at this point. Like event binding, get element by, like, the CSS selector one, but in reality, CanJS doesn't itself ever use like anything other than just get by ID.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I don't think so either. And that would be, I think, pretty helpful for us too, in order to maintain it, make it more maintainable, right?
Yeah.
So that would be a version 3 change, I guess.
Yeah. I think what we should do is just really universal JS needs to pop out. If we did that, then it's much easier for us to kind of say, okay, well, we have a standalone universal JS, we have the jQuery and Zepto ones. Here's like mostly filled out for at least CanJS's purposes. The Dojo YUI and MooTools ones, we just take that code that's there and say, okay, well, these methods are all filled out, but hey, if you want to use, if you really want to be using the same MooTools universal for like features on CanJS that are like, the select tag, well, you've got to make a choice. You've either got to implement it, help us implement it, because we're not going to do it, or you can just use the standalone version for those. And maybe things are bigger, or you're limited in which browsers you get support. And that's a little bit easier for us to say, well, here's a different project you can help fill out then. And maybe
that will make. Sorry. Go ahead.
And maybe because I think universal would be attractive to, it's something that we might be able to sell to the Angular and all of the other folks who basically have something like that internally. Like, hey, here's a project. You can make a custom build that has the methods of like your internal jQuery that you're building for yourself. And if maybe we could draw some like Zepto or some YUI folks and things like that to say, hey, here's, you guys can help fill us that out for us because we don't want to do all of it.
It will make our build and deploy a ton easier too. And CanUtil is not really formalized, right? We can basically implement it as we needed it, which makes sense, right? But yeah, I think I'm gonna pick it up again. I didn't get that far, but it does exist, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, Chris, I think, should we answer some questions there? Joe had, I think, 2 questions.
Yeah, it looks like Joe asked, where he could find documentation, find previous Hangouts, but Alexis already answered that for him, so hopefully that answered that question. But then Joe had another question where he said, has anyone worked on an Atom IO package for inline CanJS assistance, autocomplete, inline help, etc.? So he wants to tackle that one for Joe.
I don't know what Atom IO is.
It's like a text editor. Chris, mute yourself. It's like Atom IO. It's a lot like Sublime. A lot of people really like it. It's supposed to be really easy for writing plugins for. I've never used it personally. That would be cool though. It's all written.
So we don't have any, but we do have a Dash doc set, and I think Atom does integration for Dash. I'm not sure. I could also be lying, but we do have a Dash doc set for CanJS if you use Dash on macOS. And then you'd at least should probably get API.
That's a good point. I bet you can hook up Dash to Atom, because I know you can do that for Sublime, so I bet you can do it for Atom as well. There's like 1 million plugins.
Yeah, and another thing for resources that Alexis didn't reply, besides the YouTube channel and our guides, there's the To-Do MVC app, which just implements To-Do MVC for CanJS. And it's actually a pretty good resource, I think.
You can do the showcase.
Showcase. Oh yeah, wait. That's where's showcase here? Opening showcase. No featured items. How do I add one? I can't. Chris, can you try?
Oh yeah.
Will you do it?
No. So what you want to do to MVC?
Yeah, CanJS to do MVC. I put it in the chat.
Yeah. Pressure's on you, Chris.
What the heck?
Showcase.
Everyone's just kind of staring around.
Yeah, sorry. I will put up cars because they're a big CanJS user, I guess. Try to. Oh, so one thing I just put up is the CanJS meetups page. That has a lot of good tutorials in it. It has the to-do MVC walkthrough. It has like a can.Component walkthrough, a can map walkthrough, an ATM, a can route beginner tutorial, and that's where I put up a lot of the meetup material. If you are in one of the cities that we do a meetup in, go to those because I do give the meetup authors all that content. One other thing about these kind of resources and dash docset, I am going to work on document.js, finishing that pretty soon. It'd be really great for, if I need to work with Andrew and make sure that that exports nicely to dash, and it would be good to just make it generalized so anybody can say, hey, here's essentially the graph, the documentation object graph, and you can just read, anybody can read through that and export however they want. So.
It doesn't look like we can get the showcase to work. Is there anything else anybody had for this week, or?
You should use CanJS.
In Steel.js.
Yes.
Yeah. So what do you guys want me to work on next? My plan is to finish
Document.js. Oh, you're talking about can?
2 on 3. We gotta get 2 and 3 out. We can probably do that today because
no 2 and 3. That's well 2 and 3 and minor. I want to do at the same kind of time, release them at the same time.
Well,
So-
basically, it was just we'll just pull master 2 and 3 back into minor, right? Like
Yeah.
it's yeah. Okay.
If we're talking about like CanJS features, I really like Can Connect.
Oh,
the only
no,
one
I'm
for
not.
me.
So to be, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we're getting into more Bitovi stuff than maybe we should for the CanJS meetup. But ideally, we need to get like David and maybe someone else free to do CanJS full time at this point. We really need that to happen. But we have a big client right now, and we need him on that. So we'll figure it out. But my priority right now is get CanJS minor, and so that we can start switching to the new Steel and CanJS 2 and 3 out, and then I'm going to move on to document.js, getting just the basics working of document.js. Then I'm going to fix func units, weird internal problems that it has, and release a new version of func unit that's like finally a really solid, strong, like internally good version of func unit. And then
I'm almost done with Testy.
Nice.
I demoed it yesterday.
And if,
So,
if we get Testy, func unit, document.js, new version of Steel, and CanJS all working together, we're ready for like a new version of JavaScript MVC, or if we want to call it done.js or whatever we want to call it. We're ready for like here's the full like package. So that's kind of what at least that's what I've got my sights set on, which is obviously handy for all of us because that's what we do development.
I love the Steel.js website. I think that's how all of them need to look like. The front page is actually really nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like the 2.2 and the 2.3 releases, do we have like a ballpark on when we think those will come out, or is it too far out?
I think 2.2. Well, it depends on if we keep. It depends on how the select stuff goes, right? If we can make it work, 2.2 will probably like. I think 2.2 is going to come out soon. I would like 2.2 in like a month or two for sure. It depends on how content goes, if content makes it into 2.2 or not. I want to have a quick 2.2 release because there's just the new Steel stuff needs to come in, and the Element stuff is already kind of quasi-working. So I'd much rather have like a lot of 2.1, 2 or 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, like just quick releases. So yeah, soon, but select might not be in there.
Cool. Well, it's 1:50 my time Pacific, so I think I'm gonna call a halt to the Hangout this week. But thank you for everybody. This was I don't know. I really like this, figuring out all the new features that are coming out and kind of seeing a timeline on them. So till next week, and thanks again to everybody.
Cool. Thanks, Chris.